The latex glove snaps against her wrist, a sharp punctuation in the sterile silence of the customs office. My heart hammers, a frantic bird against my ribs. The officer's face is impassive, all hard lines and suspicion as she pulls it from my carry-on. A passport. Not mine. His. The dark blue cover is scuffed. The gold embossing faded, but it's the crimson smear across the photo page that makes my breath catch. Blood. Dried, but undeniably blood. The man my wife swore she'd never see again. The antiseptic smell of the room, sharp and chemical, claws at my throat, mingling with the slick, cold sweat prickling my skin. My own. Nervous sweat. Panic, cold and sharp, lances through me. That's not mine, I stammer, the words clumsy, too loud in the sudden quiet. Her eyes, chips of ice, fix on me. Whose is it, sir? The question hangs, heavy and accusing. How did it get there? Sarah. It had to be Sarah. The meticulous way she'd packed my bag. The memories, sharp and unwelcome, begin to surface. 3 weeks earlier, life was simple. Or so I let myself believe. Our townhouse, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street, was my sanctuary. Sarah, my wife of 5 years, was the architect of that peace. Or so it seemed. Her laughter was the soundtrack to my evenings, her touch a familiar comfort in the dark. We had a rhythm, Sarah and I. A carefully curated life that felt like a bespoke suit, perfectly tailored, effortlessly comfortable. The kind of life you see in glossy magazines, the kind that makes other people sigh with a touch of envy. Contentment. That's what I would have called it. Then came the Thailand trip. A necessary evil, I'd told her. A week of schmoozing potential investors for my tech startup. Just 7 days, love, I'd said, kissing the top of her head as she scrolled through fabric samples for her interior design business. I'll be back before you know it. Her smile hadn't quite reached her eyes. That was the first flicker. The tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. Her behavior around the packing was odd. Usually, I'm left to my own devices, a whirlwind of last-minute decisions and forgotten essentials. But this time, Sarah was a whirlwind of organized efficiency. "Let me, David," she'd insisted, her voice a little too bright, her hands fluttering over my shirts. "You focus on your presentations. I'll make sure you have everything." She'd laid out my clothes with an almost reverent care, folding and refolding, her brow furrowed in concentration. The lavender scent of her perfume, usually a comfort, clung to everything, a fragrant shroud over my belongings. It was subtle, the way a single discordant note can mar a perfect symphony. I'd feel a prickle of unease, a sense of something not quite right, like a loose thread on a perfectly woven tapestry. She hovered, a beautiful, anxious moth around the flame of my impending departure. Questions about my itinerary, my meetings, the hotel things she'd never shown much interest in before. I'd catch her watching me, a strange, unreadable expression in her eyes. Nervousness, I'd decided. Just pre-trip jitters. She hated when I traveled. Or maybe it was more than that. A tiny seed of suspicion, unwelcome but persistent, began to sprout in the fertile ground of my mind. My quiet power move, a habit honed over years of navigating corporate politics, and now, apparently, marital intricacies, was to observe. I'd feign obliviousness, offer placid smiles, and answer her questions with a calm I didn't quite feel. But inside, I was a meticulous accountant, cataloging every hesitant glance, every strained smile, every question that seemed to carry a hidden weight. I filed them away, these small anomalies, telling myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of the upcoming investor meetings was making me jumpy. She'd insisted on organizing my carry-on herself. "Just the essentials, David. Passport, laptop, a change of clothes. I'll make sure it's all easily accessible." Her hands, usually so steady when sketching designs or arranging flowers, trembled slightly as she zipped the bag shut. I'd almost commented on it, almost reached out to still those restless fingers, but something held me back. That seed of suspicion was growing, unfurling tiny, insistent leaves. The lavender scent was strongest then, as she pressed a final, lingering kiss to my lips. "Be safe," she'd whispered, her voice tight. The air around us felt charged, thick with unspoken words. Unease had become a knot in my stomach, a dull ache behind my eyes. 2 days before my flight, the pretense of normalcy shattered. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming a tuneless melody while making tea, when her phone buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. She glanced at it, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she snatched it up. "I'll just take this in the study," she said, her voice carefully neutral. The click of the study door was soft, but it echoed in the sudden silence of our perfect, meticulously curated home. I stood there, the scent of Earl Grey and something akin to fear prickling my nostrils. The murmur of her voice, hushed and urgent, drifted from behind the closed door. I couldn't make out the words, only the cadence, a rapid, anxious flow, punctuated by sharp, indrawn breaths. It wasn't the tone of a casual chat or even a business call. It was the sound of desperation, of secrets whispered in the shadows. The knot in my stomach tightened, suspicion blooming into a dark, ugly flower. My flight was in 2 days, and suddenly Thailand felt less like a business trip and more like an escape, or perhaps a trap. The murmur from the study continued, a low thrum of anxiety that vibrated through the floorboards, through the very foundation of our seemingly perfect marriage. My quiet cataloging had reached a critical mass. The unease had solidified into a cold dread. What was she hiding? And who was on the other end of that hushed, frantic call? The scent of lavender, once a symbol of her comforting presence, now seemed cloying, a reminder of the layers of deception I was beginning to sense. The ticking clock of my departure wasn't just counting down to a flight. It felt like it was counting down to a revelation I wasn't sure I was ready for. I moved closer to the study door, my feet silent on the polished oak floor. I wasn't proud of eavesdropping, but the carefully constructed illusion of our life was crumbling, and I needed to know why. Her voice, though still muffled, was clearer now. Stress. Urgent. Words like can't, dangerous, no choice floated out. Sharp little barbs that snagged in my mind. There was a distinct tremor in her tone, a raw fear that was utterly unlike the composed, confident Sarah I knew. This wasn't just nervousness about my trip. This was something far deeper, far more troubling. The name Marcus was whispered, so faint I almost missed it, but it registered, lodging itself like a splinter under my skin. Marcus. Who was Marcus? The call ended abruptly. Silence descended again, thicker this time, heavier. I retreated quickly, back to the kitchen, my mind racing. When she emerged, her face was pale, her eyes overly bright. She forced a smile that didn't reach them. "Just a client," she said, her voice a little too airy. "Last-minute panic about some fabric choices." A lie. A blatant, clumsy lie. And in that moment, the shift was complete. Contentment had bled into unease, unease had festered into suspicion, and suspicion had now hardened into a chilling certainty. Sarah was involved in something serious. And it had something to do with this mysterious Marcus. The carefully curated perfection of our marriage was just that, a curation, an illusion. And I, the contented husband, had been the oblivious audience. The 2 days until my flight stretched before me, no longer a simple countdown but a tightrope walk over a chasm of unknowns. The next morning, Sarah was a flurry of forced cheerfulness. She made my favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes, her movements quick, almost jerky. The lavender scent still clung to her, but now it felt like a disguise, a fragrant smokescreen. My suspicion from the night before had settled into a cold, hard knot of certainty. I watched her, my own quiet power move in full effect, pretending everything was normal while my mind raced, replaying that hushed phone call and the fear in her voice, the whispered name, Marcus. She chattered about inconsequential things, a new gallery opening, a difficult client, the weather. I nodded and smiled, playing my part in this unsettling charade. But I saw the way her gaze kept darting to my packed carry-on, sitting innocently by the door. Her insistence on packing it herself now felt less like helpfulness and more like opportunity. An opportunity for what, I didn't yet know. The discovery of deleted text messages on her phone later that afternoon was almost predictable. A logical next step in this unraveling mystery. She had left her phone on the bedside table while she showered. My fingers, usually steady, fumbled slightly as I navigated to her messages. The inbox was clean, too clean. But the recently deleted folder wasn't empty. A string of messages, all from an unsaved number, all erased. My heart hammered as I recovered them. Vague, coded phrases. Package ready? Is it safe? He knows? The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth, sharp and bitter. Betrayal. It was a cold, hard slap in the face. I wanted to confront her then and there, to demand an explanation. But years of strategic thinking, of observing and calculating before acting, held me back. Instead, I made my own quiet power move. I quickly connected her phone to my laptop, initiating a full data backup. If she was deleting messages, who knew what else she might erase? Every piece of information, every digital crumb could be crucial. When she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her hair damp, I tried to initiate a conversation, a gentle probing. Anything I should know before I go, Sarah? Anything unusual? She met my gaze, her eyes wide, almost innocent. Then she closed the distance between us, her hand tracing the line of my jaw, her lips finding mine. It was a masterclass in deflection, a wave of calculated intimacy designed to disarm, to distract. And for a moment, lost in the familiar scent of her skin and the softness of her kiss, I almost let it. Almost. But the cold knot of suspicion remained. The backed-up phone data, once I had a chance to delve into it later that evening while she was ostensibly on a call with her mother, painted a more detailed, more disturbing picture. Financial irregularities. Small, consistent transfers of money to an untraceable offshore account. Not huge sums, but enough to be significant. Enough to suggest a clandestine operation. And then, buried in a hidden folder in her cloud storage, I found them. Old photographs. Sarah, younger, radiant, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. A handsome man, with dark, intense eyes and an easy smile. The file names were simple. Sarah and Marcus. Beach, 2018. Marcus, graduation. Marcus Chen. The name from the hushed phone call. Her ex-boyfriend, I pieced together from snippets of old emails I also uncovered. Someone she'd dated before we met. Someone who, according to a cryptic email exchange, had left town suddenly 2 years ago, under a cloud of unspecified trouble. Sarah had never mentioned him, not once in 5 years. The omission felt like another layer of betrayal. She was sending him money. That much was clear. But why? And what did it have to do with my trip to Thailand? The pieces were beginning to connect, forming a picture I didn't like. A picture that threatened to shatter the life I thought I had. My determination to uncover the truth solidified. I was no longer just an uneasy husband. I was an investigator, piecing together the fragments of my wife's secret life. The final, damning piece of evidence came late that night, less than 18 hours before my departure. I was cross-referencing flight manifests, a desperate, long-shot attempt to find something. And there it was. Sarah's name, a ticket booked to Bangkok, same week as mine, different flight, arriving a day after me. The screen blurred, the letters swimming before my eyes. She wasn't just sending money to Marcus Chen. She was going to him, and my trip, my carry-on, was somehow part of her plan. The metallic taste of adrenaline was back, stronger this time, mixed with a profound sense of dread. The clock was ticking, louder than ever, counting down to a confrontation I knew was inevitable, in a city halfway across the world. The flight to Bangkok was 18 hours of suspended animation. Every bump of turbulence, every chime of the seatbelt sign ratcheted up my anxiety. My carry-on sat under the seat, in front of me. A Pandora's box. I was both terrified and desperate to open. What had Sarah hidden inside? Why the blood-stained passport I'd glimpsed in that horrible, flash-forward moment in the customs office, a moment that now felt terrifyingly real. An inevitable future rushing towards me. I replayed her strange behavior, her insistence on packing that bag, the deleted texts, the money transfers, Marcus Chen. It all swirled in my head, a toxic cocktail of suspicion and fear. My hyper-awareness extended to every passenger, every flight attendant. Was anyone watching me? Did they know? Paranoid. I was definitely paranoid. The security check at Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok was an ordeal. Every beep of the scanner, every rummage through my suitcase by a stone-faced official sent a fresh jolt of panic through me. But nothing. My checked luggage was fine. The carry-on, the one Sarah had packed, sailed through without a second glance. A temporary reprieve, but it did little to soothe the frantic thrumming in my chest. Bangkok hit me like a physical blow. The humid air, thick and cloying, wrapped around me the moment I stepped out of the airport. It was a chaotic symphony of sounds, the incessant honking of tuk-tuks, the sizzle of street food, the melodic babble of a language I didn't understand. Exhaust fumes and the sweet, pungent aroma of spices mingled. An olfactory assault that left me reeling. Culture shock, combined with jet lag and a profound sense of dread, made my first day of business meetings a blur. I nodded, smiled, shook hands, my mind a million miles away, stuck on the image of that bloody passport. Back in my hotel room, a sterile oasis of air-conditioned calm, I searched, meticulously. I emptied my suitcase, ran my hands along every seam, tapped every panel. Nothing. The carry-on yielded no secrets. Just my laptop, a change of clothes, a dop kit. Had I imagined it all? Was the stress finally getting to me? Or was Sarah simply better at this than I thought? That evening, before heading out to a forced dinner with potential investors, I made another quiet power move. I propped my phone up on the bedside table, angled towards the luggage, and set it to record. If someone was going to search my room, if Sarah had an accomplice in Bangkok, I wanted to know. Dinner was an exercise in polite torture. I feigned interest, asked the right questions, laughed at the right jokes, all while the image of that bloody passport, of Sarah's secret life, gnawed at me. The humid Bangkok air, even in the upscale restaurant, felt heavy, oppressive. It was late when I returned. The room was as I'd left it, or so it seemed. I checked the recording on my phone. For the first hour, nothing but the silent room. Then, a flicker of movement. The door opened, a figure slipped inside. A hotel cleaner, or so I thought. But she didn't touch the bed, didn't empty the trash. She went straight for my luggage. Not the suitcase, but the carry-on. My carry-on. She ran her hands over it, her movements quick, practiced. Then, she left as silently as she'd entered. My heart hammered. Someone knew. Someone was looking for something. Adrenaline surged, cold and sharp. I grabbed the carry-on, my hands trembling. This time I was more thorough. I felt along the lining, pressing, probing. And then my fingers brushed against it. A subtle irregularity, a faint ridge, a hidden compartment. My breath hitched. With shaking hands, I worked at the seam. It peeled back, revealing a small, flat pocket. Inside, nestled against the fabric, was not just a passport. His passport, Marcus Chen's, the photo confirming his identity, the pages disturbingly stiff in places, as if with dried liquid. But there was more. A small encrypted USB drive, and cash. A thick wad of US dollars. Shock, cold and visceral, washed over me. This was bigger than a secret affair, bigger than sending money to an ex-boyfriend. This was dangerous. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My hotel room had been searched while I was at dinner. Not by the woman on the recording. She was clearly looking for the hidden compartment itself, which meant she hadn't found it. No, this was a different search, a more professional one. Subtle, but unmistakable. The contents of my drawers were slightly rearranged, the papers on my desk shifted by a millimeter. Someone else knew I had Marcus's passport, or at least suspected I was a conduit. The paranoia that had been a low hum now crescendoed into a deafening roar. I was in too deep, and the game, whatever it was, had just become infinitely more perilous. The ticking clock wasn't just about my business trip anymore. It was about survival. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, insufficient. I stared at the passport, the USB, the cash. Marcus Chen. Who was he, really? And what had Sarah dragged me into? The humid Bangkok air, which had seemed merely oppressive before, now felt suffocating, laced with unseen threats. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the hotel, every distant siren sounded like an approaching danger. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The next morning, stepping out onto the bustling Bangkok streets, I was a different man. The curious tourist, the focused businessman, they were gone. In their place was a hunted animal, every sense on high alert. And I was right. They were following me. Two men, nondescript, blending seamlessly into the urban chaos. But their eyes, when I caught them in a shop window's reflection, were cold, calculating. My quiet power move of setting up the phone recording had revealed one threat. Now, another, more overt one, was tailing my every move. I tried calling Sarah, straight to voicemail. Again and again. The silence on the other end of the line was a gaping wound. Was she okay? Was she part of this surveillance? Or was she a victim, like I was rapidly becoming? The fear for her, sharp and sudden, momentarily eclipsed my own. My business meetings were a charade. I sat through presentations, my mind racing, scanning every face in the room, every shadow in the hallway. Marcus Chen. I needed to know more about him. During a lunch break, I excused myself and made a call to a well-connected associate in Hong Kong, a man who owed me a significant favor. "I need information," I said, my voice low, urgent. "On a man named Marcus Chen, possibly involved in unofficial business." My associate, a man who navigated the murky undercurrents of Asian commerce with practiced ease, promised to look into it. This was another of my quiet power moves, leveraging my legitimate business network for decidedly illegitimate purposes. The information, when it came a few hours later via an encrypted message, was chilling. Marcus Chen wasn't just an ex-boyfriend who'd skipped town. He was rumored to have connections to a powerful triad-linked corporation, a company with a veneer of legitimacy, but a rotten core of criminal enterprise. He had been an insider, privy to their secrets. And then he'd vanished. The official story was that he'd embezzled funds. The unofficial rumor, the one whispered in hushed tones, was that he'd witnessed something he shouldn't have, something that made him a liability. He'd gone into hiding, a ghost in the system. The passport in my carry-on, his passport, wasn't just a travel document. It was his lifeline, his only means of escape, perhaps. And the USB drive? Evidence, it had to be. The blood I'd seen in my premonition, the stiffness of the pages, it wasn't from violence against him, but from an injury he'd sustained. Sarah hadn't put a target on my back by planting it. She'd been trying to save him. And maybe, in her own desperate way, protect me too by making me an unwitting courier. The thought was a small, fragile comfort in the rising tide of fear. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Back in the hotel lobby, a grand, impersonal space teeming with tourists and businessmen, they cornered me. The two men from the street. One blocked my path to the elevators, the other materialized at my elbow. "Mr. Davies," the one beside me said, his voice soft, his English accented. "We need to talk about what you're carrying." There was no point feigning ignorance. My mind raced. The lobby was crowded. A scene would be risky for them. I needed to get out, to create distance. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And then I moved. Not towards the elevators, but towards the main entrance, a sudden, unexpected burst of speed. The chaos of Bangkok traffic, the blare of horns, the roar of motorcycle engines, the river of humanity, that was my only hope. I plunged into the throng, the men close behind. It was a desperate, adrenaline-fueled chase through a labyrinth of a city I barely knew. Dodging street vendors, weaving through a crush of motorbikes, the humid air burning my lungs. I could hear them, their footsteps pounding behind me. The sensory overload was immense. The vibrant colors, the exotic smells, the sheer, overwhelming noise. It was in that desperate flight, the city a dizzying, hostile blur, that a crucial piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Sarah wasn't betraying me by trying to get Marcus out of trouble. She was protecting him. The realization hit me with a jolt, a strange admixture of relief and amplified fear. Relief that her actions weren't born of malice towards me, but fear because the stakes were clearly life and death. I managed to lose them, ducking into a crowded market, the press of bodies a temporary shield. My heart was a wild thing in my chest. I found a grimy internet cafe, the air thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and cheap noodles. I needed to understand. I needed to help Sarah. As I sat there, drenched in sweat, the image of her face, pale and strained as she packed my bag, flashed in my mind. The fear in her eyes hadn't been for my trip. It had been for Marcus, and for what she was asking me to do. The weight of it, the sheer desperate gamble she'd taken. My anger, the sting of betrayal I'd felt began to recede, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. Then my burner phone, the one I'd bought as a precaution, buzzed. An unknown number, a text message, simple, chilling. "We have your wife. Bring the passport to Wat Pho Temple. Midnight." My blood ran cold. Sarah. They had Sarah. The chaos of the Bangkok traffic outside the cafe, the honking horns and roaring engines, suddenly felt like the soundtrack to my worst nightmare. The understanding I'd just reached, the fragile hope that she wasn't betraying me, now curdled into raw, sickening terror. 4 hours. I had 4 hours to get Marcus Chen's passport and the USB drive to a temple on the other side of this sprawling, hostile city, or Sarah would pay the price. The hunter had become the hunted, and now the hunted had become the bait. The race to Wat Pho was a frantic blur. Every tick of the clock in the stolen taxi was a hammer blow against my sanity. Panic clawed at me, cold and sharp. Sarah! They had Sarah! My mind reeled, replaying the message, the stark, brutal words. Was she a hostage? Or was this part of an elaborate charade, a way to force my hand? The confusion was agonizing. A memory surfaced, unbidden, from years ago, long before I knew Sarah. A news report about a daring rescue during a building collapse in Hong Kong. A young architect, Marcus Chen, had risked his own life to pull a trapped woman from the rubble. That woman! Could it have been Sarah? It would explain so much. The depth of her loyalty, her willingness to risk everything. She wasn't just protecting an old flame. She owed him her life. The realization settled, heavy and profound. She wasn't betraying me. She was honoring a debt, a life-altering moment from her past that she'd never shared. The incense smoke from a street-side shrine, sweet and cloying, drifted into the taxi, a strangely calming scent amidst the turmoil in my soul. I arrived at Wat Pho with an hour to spare, another of my quiet power moves, a desperate attempt to seize some control. The temple complex was vast, a sprawling labyrinth of golden spires, intricate carvings, and serene courtyards, eerily beautiful in the moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the faint, melodic chime of temple bells, an ethereal, almost dreamlike atmosphere. I moved through the shadows, my senses heightened, cataloging entry points, escape routes, potential ambush spots. I had to assume this was a trap, that they wouldn't just let us walk away. Midnight. I stood in the designated courtyard, the passport and USB feeling like lead weights in my pocket. The silence was heavy, expectant. Then, movement in the shadows. Not the menacing figures I expected, but Sarah. Her face was pale, etched with worry, but her eyes were defiant. She wasn't a prisoner, she was an ally. Relief so potent it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. "David," she breathed, rushing towards me, her hands gripping my arms. Thank God, I was so worried. "They said they had you," I managed, my voice hoarse. She shook her head. "A lie. To make you come. To make you comply." "The Peril, then." Another figure emerged from the deeper shadows behind a giant, gilded Buddha, Marcus Chen. He was leaning heavily on a cane, his face gaunt, a fresh, angry-looking gash stitched crudely above his eye. He looked older than his photos, haunted. The blood on the passport. It was his. From this recent injury, not some old act of violence he'd committed. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice raspy. "You don't know what you've done." The story spilled out then, a torrent of whispered words in the moonlit courtyard. Marcus hadn't embezzled money. He'd stumbled upon evidence of a massive corporate conspiracy, a network of corrupt businessmen involved in everything from illegal arms deals to political assassinations. His own company, a multinational conglomerate with fingers in countless pies, was at the heart of it. He'd witnessed a murder, a high-level executive silenced for threatening to expose them. The USB drive contained everything: encrypted bank records, surveillance photos, even a recording of the murder itself. He'd been on the run ever since, the corporation's ruthless enforcers hounding him across continents. Sarah had hidden the passport and USB in my luggage as a desperate gamble. She knew I was coming to Bangkok for legitimate business, that my passage through customs would likely be less scrutinized. She'd planned to retrieve it from me here, to help Marcus disappear again, to get him to a place where he could leak the evidence without being killed. She hadn't told me because she wanted to protect me, to keep me insulated from the danger. If I didn't know, I couldn't be implicated. It was a flawed plan, born of desperation, but her motives, they were pure. To save the man who had saved her life, and to shield the man she loved. My love for her, bruised and battered by suspicion, was suddenly, overwhelmingly, renewed. "The blood on the passport," I said, looking at Marcus's injured face. "It's yours." He nodded. "A close call, a few days ago in Chiang Mai. They almost had me." The relief was immense, yet fleeting. Just as Marcus finished speaking, the ethereal calm of the temple was shattered. Figures emerged from every archway, every shadowy alcove blocking the exits. Men in dark suits, their faces grim, their intentions unmistakable. Corporate assassins. They'd tracked Marcus here, or perhaps they'd been waiting all along. The temple bells, which had sounded so serene moments before, now seemed to toll a warning. Then, another sound pierced the night. Faint at first, then growing louder. Sirens, police sirens. Someone had called for backup. But whose backup? The corrupt local police? Bought and paid for by the corporation? Or someone else? The cliffhanger wasn't just the surrounding assassins. It was the uncertainty of who was coming to the rescue, or to seal their doom. Adrenaline surged. A familiar, unwelcome companion. We were trapped. David, Sarah, and Marcus. An unlikely trio against a small army of corporate killers. "This way," I hissed, grabbing Sarah's hand, pulling her towards a narrow passage I'd scouted earlier. My quiet power move of arriving early was paying off, giving us a sliver of a chance. Marcus, despite his injury, moved with surprising speed. We plunged into the labyrinthine heart of the temple complex, the golden spires and serene Buddha statues now obstacles in a desperate game of cat and mouse. The shouts of our pursuers echoed behind us. This was it, the raw, primal instinct to survive. Teamwork, born of necessity, took over. Sarah, surprisingly agile, led us through a series of darkened corridors. Marcus, despite his pain, kept pace, his eyes scanning for threats. "The USB," I panted, as we ducked behind a large prayer drum. "What exactly is on it?" "Everything," Marcus rasped. Bank records tracing illicit payments, photos of them meeting with known arms dealers, the video of them killing Chen, my old boss, and witness testimony, mine and others they've silenced. He paused, his breath catching. "Your company, Davis." "Omnicorp." "They're involved. Deeply." My blood ran cold. Omnicorp. The very investors I was here to woo, my entire career, my reputation, built on a foundation of lies and corruption. The irony was a bitter pill. The choice that had seemed abstract before, turn in evidence and risk my career or stay silent, was now stark, brutally real. My mind raced. My business connections in Bangkok. One in particular, Kun Anand, a respected local entrepreneur, owed me a big favor. He had resources, influence. If anyone could get us out of this, it was him. This was my next quiet power move, leveraging those carefully cultivated relationships. I fumbled for my burner phone, dialing his number, praying he'd pick up. The sticky heat of Bangkok's back alleys, the smell of street vendor food, grilled pork, and chili wafted over the temple walls as we huddled in the shadows, the sounds of the city a stark contrast to the life and death struggle we were in. Anand answered on the third ring. I explained the situation in clipped, urgent tones. He listened, his silence more unnerving than questions. Finally, he spoke. "I know a place, a safe house, Old Town. I'll send a car. Be at the South Gate in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. It felt like an eternity. The chase resumed, a desperate scramble through moonlit courtyards and incense-filled prayer halls. We evaded one group of pursuers only to run straight into another, Sarah cried out as a bullet ricocheted off a stone pillar inches from her head. I pulled her down, shielding her with my body. We made it to the south gate, breathless, hearts pounding. A black sedan idled by the curb, Anand himself at the wheel. We scrambled in, the car speeding off into the chaotic embrace of Bangkok's streets, just as more armed men spilled out of the temple gates. The safe house was a nondescript apartment above a noodle shop in a bustling, vibrant neighborhood. Anand led us up a rickety flight of stairs, the smell of frying garlic and soy sauce thick in the air. Inside, it was sparse, but clean. For the first time in hours, I felt a flicker of hope. Sarah sank onto a worn sofa, her face pale but resolute. "David," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "About Marcus. About my past." "I know," I said gently, taking her hand. "He saved your life." Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes, years ago, I was trapped. He didn't even know me, but he risked everything." She looked at Marcus, a profound gratitude in her gaze. "I owed him. I couldn't let them kill him." "And you didn't tell me because you were protecting me," I finished for her. She nodded, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I was so scared. I didn't want you involved in this." The moral conflict raged within me. My company, my career, everything I'd worked for tainted by this filth. Could I really expose them, knowing the personal cost? But then I looked at Sarah, at Marcus, at the evidence on that USB drive. There was no choice, not really. Just as a fragile sense of security began to settle, Anand's face hardened. He'd been on his phone, speaking in rapid-fire Thai. He hung up, his eyes grave. "We have a problem," he said, his voice low. "The police, they're on their way. Not the regular police. The special police. The ones on Omnicorp's payroll." He looked at me, his expression a mixture of apology and fear. "I'm compromised, David. They know I helped you. We have to leave, now." The flicker of hope died. Betrayal, sharp and unexpected, from the one man I thought we could trust. The safe house was no longer safe. The corrupted police force was closing in. The ticking clock had been reset, and it was counting down faster than ever. The betrayal cut deep. Anand, a man I'd shared expensive dinners and business triumphs with, his face was now a mask of fear and resignation. "They have my family," he whispered, not meeting my eyes. "I had no choice." It was a bitter echo of Sarah's own justification, but this time it felt like a nail in our coffin. There was no time for recriminations. We were on our own again. "The British Embassy," I said, the thought hitting me with sudden clarity. Diplomatic soil, our only chance. It was miles away, across a city now actively hunting us. The chase was relentless. Anand's compromised network meant our escape routes were vanishing before we even reached them. We were herded, channeled. It was clear they weren't just trying to catch us. They were trying to eliminate us before we could reach any kind of sanctuary. Then, my final quiet power move, an act of sheer desperation. As we ducked into another crowded market, the scent of jasmine and diesel fumes thick in the air, I pulled out the USB drive and my own smartphone. "Marcus, give me the highlights. The most damning evidence. Quick!" While Sarah kept watch, her eyes scanning the throng for pursuers, Marcus, his face tight with pain and urgency, rattled off file names, key documents, the core of his meticulously gathered proof. With fumbling fingers, I began uploading, live streaming to a secure, anonymous platform I'd set up years ago for a whistleblower in a different corporate scandal. It was a long shot, a digital flare in the darkness. Insurance. If we didn't make it, the evidence would. "What are you doing?" Sarah hissed, her eyes wide with fear. Making sure this isn't all for nothing, I said grimly. The upload progress bar crawled. The streets became a blur of near misses and frantic sprints. We commandeered a tuk-tuk. The driver bribed with a wad of Marcus's cash, the little three-wheeled vehicle weaving precariously through the congested arteries of Bangkok. Bullets whizzed past. One grazed my arm, a searing pain that I barely registered through the adrenaline. As we neared the embassy district, a phalanx of black SUVs converged, hemming us in. This was it, the end of the line. "David, the USB!" Marcus yelled, clutching his side where an earlier injury had clearly reopened. "Get it to them!" Sarah did something then that I'll never forget. As the SUVs screeched to a halt, disgorging heavily armed men, she grabbed a discarded fruit vendor's pole, screaming, a wild, defiant cry, and charged towards them, a momentary, insane distraction. "Go!" she yelled over her shoulder. "Get him to the embassy." It was the opening we needed. I dragged Marcus, half carrying him, towards the high gates of the British embassy, the Union Jack, a beacon of improbable hope. The livestream was still active, the evidence flowing out into the digital ether in real time. Marcus's proof, his life's work, his death sentence, was going public. We reached the gates just as Sarah was wrestled to the ground. Embassy guards, alerted by the commotion, emerged, their weapons drawn. A standoff. Tense, explosive, men shouting in Thai and English. "He's a British citizen!" I yelled, shoving Marcus's blood-stained passport at the nearest guard. "He's seeking asylum! He has evidence of murder, of an international conspiracy!" The cool air conditioning wafting from the embassy's open doorway felt like a different planet compared to Bangkok's oppressive, sticky heat. Then the sirens again. This time legitimate police, perhaps alerted by the embassy or by the rapidly spreading live stream. The corporate assassins hesitated, caught between the embassy's diplomatic immunity and the arriving authorities. The standoff broke. Some scattered, trying to melt back into the city. Others were apprehended. In the chaos, I saw my chance. I sprinted back towards Sarah, who was being helped to her feet by a stern-faced embassy official. I pulled her into my arms, relief so potent it was dizzying. Marcus was safe, slumped against the embassy wall, but alive. Later, inside the embassy, the world outside erupting as news of Marcus's evidence broke internationally, I did one last thing. I took Marcus Chen's passport, now a symbol not of his fugitive status, but of his impending freedom, added a printed copy of the most critical data from the USB, and mailed it via diplomatic pouch to the International Criminal Court. The corporate conspiracy, built on greed and murder, was beginning to unravel, its tendrils retracting in the harsh light of public exposure. Sarah, Marcus, and I, we were safe. For now. The evidence was out. The threat, while not entirely gone, was neutralized, defanged by the truth. The ticking clock had finally stopped. 3 months later, the familiar scent of home freshly cut grass, brewing coffee, Sarah's lavender, now a comfort once more, was a balm to my soul. We were back, but everything was different. I'd left Omnicorp, the taint of its corruption too much to bear. My career, as I knew it, was over. But in its place was something new, something cleaner. Marcus was in witness protection, a new identity, a new life slowly taking root in an undisclosed location. He was free, truly free. His old life, the one documented in that blood-stained passport, now a closed chapter. The passport itself, the one that had started this maelstrom, was safely delivered, its owner reborn. Sarah and I, we were stronger. The secrets and suspicions that had nearly torn us apart had, paradoxically, forged a deeper bond, an unbreakable trust built in the crucible of shared danger. The illusion of the perfect marriage was gone, replaced by something far more real, more resilient. My new quiet power move was a consulting firm, small, discreet, dedicated to helping whistleblowers navigate the treacherous waters of corporate exposure. It was my way of fighting back, of using my knowledge of that world for good. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah came to me in the study, her eyes shining. She held out a small, white stick, positive. A wave of emotion, so pure, so overwhelming, washed over me. Hope. A new beginning, in the truest sense. Our marriage reborn. A week later, a postcard arrived. No return address. Just a picture of a sun-drenched anonymous beach. On the back, a single sentence. "Thank you. I'm finally living again." The signature was just an M. Tucked into the envelope was a small, new passport photo. Marcus, smiling, the haunted look gone from his eyes. I looked at Sarah, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, the promise of new life blooming within her. The betrayal, the fear, the chaos of Bangkok. It had all led us here, to this quiet moment of peace, to a deeper truth, a stronger love. The passport that had started it all, a symbol of desperate escape, had ultimately delivered not just one man's freedom, but ours too,